Hi, I'm Joel Richardson, and this is The Underground. Welcome to this week's episode of The Underground, a program that explores the gospel of Jesus Christ, the testimony of the biblical prophets, current events, the convergence of all of these things, and how they relate to you and me. So there's a lot going on in the world, and I wanted to sort of jump in and break my normal scheduling to have a special episode to deal with some current events. So for anyone who has been paying attention to the news, we now have Russian troops on Syrian soil. This is a huge issue, and I've been getting a lot of emails asking questions and whatnot. So just to give you a little bit of an introduction. So after receiving an official plea for help from Syrian President Bashar Assad, after receiving official approval from the Russian parliament, Vladimir Putin has now deployed Russian troops onto Syrian soil. This is the first time that we've been in this place in over 30 years. Okay, 3 decades there has not been Russian troops on Syrian soil. So for a lot of people living today, they've never even, they've never lived to see this. And clearly this is a game changer in so many ways. So Russia has now more than 24 fighter aircraft, attack helicopters, surface-to-air missile defense systems, and hundreds of troops. They sent them not only to their naval facility that's in the port of Tartus, but there's rumors that they're setting up bases in a few different places throughout Syria. Satellite images suggest that there are at least potentially 3 different military bases. So this is a big deployment. I mean, this is a big development. Now, Russia is attacking not just ISIS. So this is the statement, is that they're going to be moving against ISIS, but they're attacking not only ISIS, but all of the various Syrian rebel groups, including American-backed Syrian rebel groups. So again, just to break this down, Bashar Assad, the president of Syria, is an Alawite. He's an Alawite Muslim. The Alawites are a very small sect that would come within, sort of the divide within Islam between Sunni and Shia Islam. The Alawites identify more with the Shia, definitely not with the Sunnis, but really they're different than the Shia. But Assad has been sort of a client state, sort of a proxy. He's been working with the Iranian government for his entire time as president. And so we need to understand that Assad is an ally of Iran. And so you have a majority in the nation, the majority Muslims are Sunnis. So you have all of these groups that began rioting, that began protesting after the birth of the Arab Spring, after the onset of the Arab Spring in late 2010, the beginning of 2011. And then this sort of emerged into a full-blown civil war. Now, some of these groups are affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Some of them have become ISIS, obviously. Others, however, are a bit more moderate. They really are just fighting for democracy. And so Russia is attacking all of them. And now again, I don't personally believe that the U.S. should be supporting and getting behind some of these so-called freedom fighters, because ultimately, a couple of years ago, those of us watching all this said, if we give them weapons, if we give them training, many of them will just flow into Al-Qaeda, flow into ISIS, and we've seen that. Now, we've seen Jabhat al-Nusra is one of the biggest, really you could just say Al-Qaeda, groups in Syria that is, it's not ISIS, but they are radical fundamentalist Sunni Muslims. We've already seen examples in the news where they're holding up weapons that were given to them by the US-backed, US-trained rebels. So there's sort of this fluid flow from one group into the next. I've always said that what John McCain And because he's been the primary politician spearheading this, I've always said that what he is doing is ridiculous. It makes no sense. But as we're looking at this, this war unfold in the region, what the U.S. has said is that they're going to choose between essentially Iran and the Sunnis. We've essentially gone with the Sunnis. What that means is that we've basically sided with ISIS. Now, while the same token, we're sort of bombing ISIS a little bit, we really haven't done anything definitive to take them out. So we need to understand that in the conflict between ISIS and Iran, the Shia, the Iraq government, who are largely Shia, they are beholden to Iran, we have said that the greater existential threat is Iran. And this is exactly what Israel has said. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that between these two different groups, between sort of the lesser of two evils, we've chosen to come against Iran and sort of back off on ISIS. This is the position, this is the predicament that we have found ourselves in the Middle East right now. And so we also need to back up a little bit and just say that what the Obama administration has done after he came into power is that he looked at the Middle East. He looked at the Bush foreign policy, the approach that we had been taking in the Middle East for decades, which was essentially to prop up and get behind these various third-rate military dictators, these autocrats that rule much of the Middle East. And we've said we're going to stop supporting them, and we're going to now begin getting behind more moderate, so-called moderate, Islamist groups. So we looked to Turkey, and we said this is the model that we want to see replicated throughout the region. So we looked at Turkey, and we said the AKP party, this is what the government said, it doesn't mean I agree with it. They said the AKP party is an Islamist group. It's an Islamist political party, and yet they're largely democratic, supposedly. And they have a fairly secular, moderate government there in Turkey. And so what we said is we want to replicate that. And so there was a very deliberate effort on behalf of the Obama administration to begin getting behind groups such as the Muslim Brotherhood, essentially saying that the Muslim Brotherhood and the AKP party in Turkey are largely one and the same. And so we decided to begin engaging in activities and a plan that would see the overthrow of these various dictators. So in Syria, we have Bashar Assad. For many, many years in Egypt, we had Hosni Mubarak. In Libya, of course, we had Gaddafi. And of course, the United States saw the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. So the idea was that we would give the people democracy. And this plan started under Bush. You know, President Bush said, if we give the people freedom, they will look at democracy and freedom, and they will choose that over Islamic law, Sharia law. They'll choose that over the Islamic way of life. And ultimately, freedom will just spread throughout the Middle East. This was sort of Reagan's idea that when the people taste freedom, they naturally gravitate toward it. The problem with that, and this is what I've been saying for so long, is that the Western world stepped into democracy after hundreds of years. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. That the philosophy and the ideas that are behind democracy, they take time to develop. And we have a part of the world that truly believes that Sharia Islamic law is God's commandment. This has been given in a divine way. They're used to being oppressed. They don't receive democracy in the same way that we receive it here in the West. And not only that, but the Islamist groups, through fear and intimidation, have a stranglehold on so much of Islamic culture. And the point is this, is rarely does it work, is that if you don't have an Islamist dictatorship in power in the Middle East, the only way to really check that is through a more secular-oriented dictator. It's largely only through dictatorship that the Middle East has been stabilized for the past few generations. And so when the Obama administration stepped in and said, we're going to move away from this model, we really, this is not conspiracy theory, as the Arab Spring was breaking out, we got behind and we saw the overthrow of Gaddafi. You know, as he was being murdered in the streets, literally being raped with a rifle. This international, leader of a sovereign state being massacred in the street. Now, he's not a great guy. Don't get me wrong. This was the doing of the United States. This was the doing of the Obama administration. When Saddam Hussein was hung by the Shia government. This was the United States doing. We began essentially decapitating these various leaders. We were instigating to see the overthrow of Hosni Mubarak. There's no question the United States was behind that. That was not merely a democratic election. There's just so much evidence that this was the hand of the United States. Well, then the idea was that the next one would be Assad. We would see the overthrow of Assad. Well, in the process of all this, implementing this great plan, as we've seen, the people of Egypt rose up and rejected it. They said, no, we don't want an Islamist government. We don't want the Brotherhood to come into power. They're not really moderate. They oppress the people, and the people of Egypt did rise up. And that was, I believe, through the power of the prayer movement, the Christian prayer movement in Egypt, as well as many of the more moderate Muslims in Egypt said, no, we don't want anything to do with this. And so as the United States is in the process of implementing this plan, now we've basically handed over Libya to radicals. ISIS is sweeping across large sections of Libya. That was the hand of the American foreign policy in the region. We've seen the entire region catch on fire, and we largely are responsible. We have been the primary instigator of this inferno that's raging across the Middle East. So with ISIS, with the junior varsity team, as President Obama referred to them, as they swept across the Middle East, we largely have been in the process of vacating and pulling out. And this has really been the plan, is to basically do nothing. Yeah, we've been dropping a few bombs. We've been sending in some special forces to try to train a group here or there. But by and large, our footprint is not only is it less visible, it is much, much smaller. And we are creating, and we have been creating, a vacuum in the Middle East. And so now Russia is stepping in to fill that vacuum. And when you look at some of the headlines in the newspapers, even just in the past few weeks, I mean, mainstream newspapers, not sort of fringe, conspiratorial, internet news sites, mainstream newspapers have been saying President Obama has essentially handed Putin the keys to become the world's most powerful leader. We are stepping back and we're giving the Middle East over to Russia. And so as you look at the process that has led to where we are today, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. Now here's the question, and this is the question that everyone is sending me emails, making comments on my website and asking. They're saying, now that Russia is in the Middle East, could this be the beginning of the Gog-Magog battle? Could this be the beginning of the battle of Gog-Magog as spoken of in Ezekiel 38 and 39? Is Ezekiel's prophecy beginning to be fulfilled right now in front of us? And the answer, quite directly, is no. This is not Ezekiel 38, 39. Now again, I want to be clear. I don't come to you as a prophet. I come to you as someone who is simply trying to do my best to responsibly work through the biblical text. I don't have any divine insight. I don't come to you having had visions or dreams, but I believe that through a careful, responsible examination of the Word of God, we can look at what's happening and saying, no, this is not the fulfillment. It's not even the beginning of the fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecy. I mean, could it be? Yes, absolutely it could be. But I believe that if we take the time to look at Ezekiel 38, 39, to discuss that, and that's what we're going to do, both in this episode and next week as well. But we also take some time to look at another key prophecy, which is Daniel chapter 8. That between those two, I think it's probably more reasonable to suggest that between those two, it's probably Daniel 8 that is in the process of beginning to be fulfilled. And so I want to take some time to sort of look at these two chapters, these two prophecies, and sort of weigh the evidence between the two, look at what's unfolding on the ground and say which one seems to be in the process of beginning to be fulfilled. And again, I think that between the two, that would clearly be Daniel chapter 8. But before we dig into Daniel chapter 8, I really want to just take some time to look at Ezekiel 38, 39. Now, again, I've walked through these passages in great detail. If you go to my website under articles, I have several articles specifically on Gog Magog, Ezekiel 38, 39. I've written quite a few articles over the years, and I've got those all organized and posted under articles. Also, in terms of some of the DVDs that I have, under Islam in the End Times Part 2, I have 2 sessions that I deal with Gog Magog, Ezekiel 38, 39 in that particular DVD, if you want to really dig into it some more. And really, that DVD was done several years ago. It's probably high time that I do another DVD where I walk comprehensively through this critical chapter. I mean, this critical oracle, these 2 chapters, because it really is such a looming, significant Old Testament prophecy. And I think right now, in light of all that's unfolding in the Middle East, I'm just, in this episode, I'm just going to sort of walk through it a little bit. But on the DVDs, I really work through this stuff in a much more careful and thorough manner. Also, I have a DVD called What Comes Next. And in that, I deal extensively. Again, I take about an hour to work through Daniel chapter 8. We recorded that in northern Iraq. We were in Kurdistan in January 2015 and just sat down. And that was really the first time that I sort of publicly worked through the text. Maybe we'll take some time on this show again to work through it a bit more, and maybe even do a bit more of an expanded exposition of that prophecy. So before we plunge into Ezekiel 38, 39, before we jump into the text, let's just take a quick break and we'll be right back.
For this week's program, we are offering the Understanding the Times Prophecy DVD bundle. This important resource bundle includes the following 4 resources. Joel's newest teaching, Where is America in Bible Prophecy DVD. This dynamic 2-session teaching DVD addresses all of the critical biblical passages that many have said point to the United States. Could the United States be Mystery Babylon, as many students of prophecy now believe? Find out in the Where in the United States in Bible Prophecy DVD. Second, you will receive the What Comes Next in the Middle East DVD. This 3-session teaching DVD examines the 2 critical passages of Daniel chapter 8 and Isaiah 19. Understanding what is happening right now in the Middle East and what may be next on the prophetic horizon. Third, you will receive the Understanding the Times DVD. This 4-session DVD addresses the gospel of the kingdom, the Jewish temple, and the coming covenant, and 2 sessions on identifying Mystery Babylon. And finally, as a bonus, you will receive Joel's documentary, End Times Eyewitness. This dynamic documentary film, shot on location throughout the Middle East, explores the unfolding signs of the return of Jesus. Together, all 4 items are only $55. To order, go to joelstrumpet.com and click on the Understanding the Times DVD bundle.
All right, welcome back. Just before the break, we were lining everything up, discussing Ezekiel 38, 39, the Battle of Gog and Magog versus Daniel chapter 8. In light of Russian troops on the ground in Syria, where is this probably leading? What is this leading to in terms of the next major fulfillment of biblical prophecy? And again, I would argue that in all likelihood, we're looking at the beginnings of the fulfillment of some of the wars that are laid out in Daniel chapter 8. But we want to go ahead and, in order to show that this is probably not talking about Ezekiel 38 and 39, I want to take some time to work through this. So, most people, when they approach Ezekiel 38, 39, there's some very, very popular ideas that are out there. And again, these are in virtually any prophecy book that you'll read over the past few decades. There's a few very popular, very common assumptions or beliefs, and I want to deconstruct some of these beliefs. So the 3 beliefs are specifically this, is that Gog, the leader of this coalition spoken of in this oracle, is from Russia. That Ezekiel 38, 39, the Battle of Gog of Magog, is a Russian-led Middle Eastern coalition of nations that will come against Israel. Okay, so this is a very common assumption that it is a Russian-led invasion. The second popular belief is that the Battle of Gog of Magog is a preliminary major Middle Eastern war that is separate from and distinct from the Antichrist. Okay, so that Gog and the Antichrist are two different individuals. They are two different end-time leaders. That Gog is not the Antichrist, that his hordes, his coalition of nations are different from the hordes and the coalition of Antichrist. Again, I don't believe that. I believe that Gog and the Antichrist are one and the same. And I believe the biblical case for that is clear. It is complete. It is thorough. And then the third very popular belief is that, and this is critical, and I just need to say something about this. This is one of the big reasons. Why, Joel, why do you take so much time to deal with this issue of whether or not the Antichrist comes from Europe or the Middle East? And it's because of a misinterpretation of Ezekiel 38 and 39, as well as Psalm 83 and some different texts that I believe have been misinterpreted. You have many, many Christians, and please follow me when I say this, because I'm not attacking any teacher, but you have many Christians who teach that Islam is about to be wiped out, that the Islamic world is about to essentially disappear from the world scene, and that Islam in the days ahead will no longer be a threat, a challenge, that it is going to literally disappear, dry up, and go away. Now, you'll hear this taught by 100 different teachers, mainstream, widely respected teachers, guys that I even like and respect and appreciate. But I thoroughly disagree with them on this issue. See, the bottom line is this. People come to the story of the end times. They have some surface understanding of a lot of the key texts. They look out at the world and they begin trying to imagine how it's all going to unfold and come to pass. And basically, what everyone does is they look at this issue of the Antichrist gathering all the nations of the world, setting himself up in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God, and they go, Muslims would never submit to that. They go, how will the Islamic world fit into that? And they go, we can't see them submitting to the Antichrist based on this sort of popular idea that he comes and claims to be God and the whole world follows him. And so essentially what they have needed to do is create a mechanism to remove Muslims from the picture. To say, well, Islam somehow it's going to disappear. And so then because they need to remove Muslims and Islam from the picture, in my opinion, they have found their basis in Ezekiel 38, 39 through a complete twisting of the text. They have created a false mechanism, a mechanism that is not in the scriptures, that says that Islam is going to be wiped out. Why is this so important to me? Why is this such a big issue? Well, it's very simple. Because until the time that Jesus returns, Islam's not going anywhere. Islam's not going to be wiped out. In fact, Islam, the Islamic world, I believe is the single greatest challenge that the world is going to face before the return of Jesus. And therefore, if that's the case, if Islam is the system of the Antichrist, then it's not going away, then we as the church need to be prepared. We're 20 years behind the curve. We need to be rising to face that challenge head on. We need to be raising up 10,000 young men and women that would be willing to lay their lives down for the sake of reaching the Islamic world. Because the way that we as believers take on the system of the Antichrist is through the gospel. It's through the power of the Holy Spirit. It's not primarily by electing leaders that are going to put better laws in place. It's not primarily by turning the Middle East into a sea of glass. I see these type of comments online and even on my own blog. People say the only solution is turning the Middle East into a sea of glass. That's not the solution. The solution that the Lord has given us is the proclamation of the gospel, is by changing hearts, laying down our lives as giving a testimony and a witness to the mercy of God, to the enemies of God, and winning a whole host, a remnant out of that part of the world in order that they would be the former Muslim believers that would make up the millennium, that would make up the believers from many of those nations. So this issue, the idea that Islam is going to be wiped out, that's a very popular belief. In next week's episode, I'm going to take some time to begin to walk through these three different misconceptions. The idea that Gog is Russia, the idea that Gog is different than the Antichrist, and the idea that Islam is going to go away. I'm going to walk through all of these things. We're going to turn to the text and show how none of these things are biblical. And again, why Russian troops on the ground in Syria is not the beginning, or is not likely the beginning, or if it is the beginning, it is the very, very, very beginning. But there are some other major events that need to unfold first before we get to Ezekiel 38. And that in all likelihood, we're looking at the beginnings of the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 8. So we'll dig into the text, we'll plunge into all of these things. In the meantime, be prayerful, folks. The world is changing quickly. Events are unfolding rapidly. And while everyone is looking at, signs in the heavens, lunar eclipses, and all those things, and these things are interesting, I want to be clear. There are some very real world events that are unfolding. I mean, we don't need to speculate about what Russian troops might mean or might not mean. I think that the scriptures are really clear about this. And so it's not an issue of sort of getting off into things like Planet X or, just strange things that I find believers, and don't get me wrong, I'm not lumping the lunar eclipses in with things like Planet X, so please hear me on this. But I find that Christians often will look to anything other than the clear word of the prophets. We need to be paying attention to what the prophets had to say. We need to be paying attention to what the Word of God has to say. So the times that we live in are sober times. We need to be paying attention. We need to be watching the signs of the times, but we need to be studying the Word of God together. So that's all the time that we have for this week. I want to thank you for being with us. Next week, we're going to dig into the Scriptures. I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, I'm Joel Richardson, and this is The Underground.
For this week's program, we are offering the Gospel in the Last Days bundle. This important resource bundle includes the following 6 resources. Joel's newest book, When a Jew Rules the World, What the Bible Really Says About Israel and the Plan of God. This powerful resource addresses all of the critical issues relating to Israel in the unfolding plan of God, exposes the errors of replacement theology, preterism, and the anti-Semitism that is now exploding across the earth. Second, you will receive the documentary film, Better Friends Than Mountains, a film about ISIS, the Kurdish people, and the gospel of Jesus Christ. This beautifully made film will inspire and move you to learn what the Lord is doing right now in one of the world's most active crisis zones. Finally, you will receive 4 copies of Dear Muslim Friend. This highly recommended book answers all of the primary objections to biblical faith commonly brought up by Muslims. Not only is this a critical book for all Christians, but it was specifically created to give away to Muslims. Together, these 6 items are valued at over $60, but when you purchase all 6 items at the discounted rate of only $50, you help support this ministry. Go to joelstrumpet.com and order the Gospel in the Last Days bundle.